and welcome to the Adroit Dojo podcast. I am your host, Hector. It is episode 10, part 2 of recommended books. Starting off with our first category is law. I only have 2 books for this section. First one is Law 101, Everything You Need to Know About American Law by Jay Feinman. It's, I want to say a pretty short book, or at least in regards for what we're looking at, which is more, I think, criminal law in regards to using martial arts in self-defense. There's only 2, maybe 3 chapters that's relevant. Next up is the Criminal Law Handbook by Sara, Berman-Barrett, and Paul Bergman. Well, the whole book is laid out pretty intelligently, basically chronological. Chapter 1 is talking to the police, like police questioning of the arrestees, which every lawyer I've heard says, just don't talk to the police, just immediately say you want to talk to your lawyer. The police are never on your side, they just want to arrest you. Doesn't matter if you're innocent, guilty, they don't want to look for the actual guilty party. They just want to arrest someone. So chapter 2 is search and seizure, which is super important. So it goes over like search warrants, warrantless, and consentless searches. Basically every variation thereof. And then it goes over arrests, police procedures, like lineup, photo IDs, and other eyewitness type things. Booking, bail. Then chapter 6 is talking about how crimes get charged, going from the crime to a criminal case and the mechanics of the charges. From there we go to criminal defense and lawyers, understanding your attorney, and just through the whole judicial system, which hopefully none of us ever have to deal with that shit. But if you do, this is definitely a good book. And then chapter 12 and 13 is understanding the languages of criminal law and the common defenses to criminal charges. So that can be pretty useful. It goes over things like mens rea, frequently used legal language, and then various charges you could be brought up on. Most of this is pretty serious. I think the most minor thing would be theft that they talk about. That, in a nutshell, is the criminal handbook, and that concludes the law portion of the book recommendations. On to our next category, technology. This one's even shorter. So I took a lot of technology-related classes in high school, programming, study of hardware, blah, blah, blah. Unfortunately, since then, I haven't really studied up much on it yet, just been coasting on my previous knowledge. So I have absolutely no idea what a good book to read for security and technology would be. So if you guys know any books out there to prevent hacking, social engineering, things like that, leave a message. Our third category is Fiscal. This one is one of those where it's I've gone away from books and more into like Investopedia and other online sources. So other than like intro to microeconomics or macroeconomic type books, I can't really recommend any. I just don't know anymore. So I would recommend, again, just a high school or college level microeconomics books. Investopedia is a good one. Entrepreneur websites have a lot of good information as well. Alright, the meat and potatoes, our final category, physical. To start off with, I will be talking about physical exercise related books and then finish it off with martial art books. So to start off with, the Personal Training Manual by the American Council of Exercise. It gives a lot of good information and gives you a great overview and in-depth knowledge of all things exercise. Well, maybe not all things exercise. for the personal training cert, there are 2 books. And this one is more of an overview, and the second book is more in-depth on specific exercises and muscle groups. And I want to say how muscles work. With a martial artist, you really don't need to know how mechanically and chemically the muscles work. That's just an in-depth level of knowledge that is irrelevant. That is our first book. It's a good one. And best of all, some sites it's really, really cheap now. If you get it from Ace, it's like $100. So, don't go that route. Our second book, A Complete Guide for Athletes and Coaches, Olympic Weightlifting by Greg Everett. Yeah, if you go to any weightlifting forum, that is like the #1 recommended book. It has a good breakdown for the 2 main lifts and then their variations to build up your base and improve your overall strength. And explosiveness and high-level strength is always, always, always good for the martial artist. The nice thing about weightlifting is you have to be flexible too, which is the main downside to powerlifting is, yeah, you can get really, really stiff and immobile from powerlifting, but weightlifting, nope, you gotta be explosive, you gotta be flexible, you gotta be strong. It is a great, great, great path to take for exercise for the martial artist. And speaking of power training, Starting Strength, Basic Barbell Training by Douchebag, Mark Rippetoe. It's a really good book, though. It teaches you the 5 basic strength movements. Mind blank. Bench press, row, squat, deadlift, overhead press, and he also goes over cleans, but I suggest just sticking with Greg Everett for learning how to clean. It's a good book. It teaches you some of the mechanics of how to do those and whatnot. I think I might have some sample programs. I don't remember, but your ACE manual will have that anyway. And you don't really need ACE. You can go NASM or any of the other ones. Next up, and the final for our physical training, is Stretching and Flexibility. Everything you never wanted to know by Brad Appleton. It is still the best source I found for learning about stretching. And this thing has been out for, I think, decades at this point. So I know I discovered it probably 10-ish years ago, and I looked old even then. All the information it seems like it was cutting edge then. A lot of the stuff on his stuff I didn't see in other sources for like 8 years. It's nuts. So it is still, I think, the best resource for stretching. Alright, going to the martial art books. I'm going to be missing a bunch, so don't get mad at me. Again, I am listing things that I have, at the bare minimum, have read at least, I'd say, a fifth of it. So if I haven't done at least that much, I'm not adding it to the list. So I'm sure there's a bunch of great MMA books, Muay Thai books, other boxing books. Here we are. First one is the Marine Urban Operations MCTP 12 TAC 10B. I'm not going to be spitting all that out in Native Phonetic. Or should I? No, while I'm recording, my mind went blank. I have no idea what M is. Alright, Mike Charlie Tango Papa 12 TAC 10 Bravo. There we go. I'm going to be clumping with the next book, so I'm not going to go over it. Next one is Training for Urban Operations, Tango Charlie 90 TAC 1. They're both pretty similar. One is Marine Corps, one is Army. It's all about urban operations, so it's pretty interesting, especially for our tactical shooting. It's really pretty interesting knowledge. Military has a ton of other manuals out there. I don't think they're too relevant. Next up, going to Fisticuffs with Boxing Mastery, Advanced Technique, Tactics, and Strategies by Mark Hatmaker, with Doug Werner, who is probably the photographer. If you need a crash course and in-depth study for boxing, it's a good one. It goes over the fundamentals, and then it goes into some of the basics of advanced stuff like tactics, strategy, counterpunching, etc. Really cool book, lots of pictures. It's written very clearly, easy to understand. Next up, American Combat Judo by Bernard Kosnick. This is a super old book. I feel like it's from the 50s or 60s. And it's not exactly judo either, but a lot of the techniques are legit. Has a lot of good pictures too. Just what they're wearing is funny looking and kind of ridiculous. Next up is an old book, The Fine Art of Jiu-Jitsu by Miss Watts, published in 1906. Yeah, that's right. That is an old book. For its day, it was amazing, I'm sure. And the fact that in 1906, a woman is practicing jiu-jitsu and then wrote a book about it is freaking awesome. So just that alone makes it worth a read. So definitely check it out, The Fine Art of Jiu-Jitsu by Miss Watts. A lot of the techniques aren't exactly good for today's day and age, but damn, it's just such a historical book. Next up is Kodokan Judo by Jigoro Kano. Yep, I'm a judoka. You know this would be on the list. It's a bit of a boring book. I suggest actually going online to like the various YouTubes and just brush up on your judo throws there. But it's still a classic and one you should definitely have. Next up, The Throws and Takedowns of Greco-Roman Wrestling by Jeff Thompson. It's a good book. I like it. Easy to understand, easy to get a handle on what's going on. And a similar one is Greco-Roman Wrestling by William Martell. They're both pretty similar, both good. I haven't read cover to cover either of them, so I couldn't really compare and contrast too much. They're both definitely good books. Next is BJJ, The Ultimate Guide to Dominating Jits and MMA Combat by Alexandre Paiva. Brazilian author, so it's in Portuguese, so I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it well. It's been a minute since I've pronounced Portuguese. It's another one of those books where I basically just flip through, not really read in depth, but it's a good book, and it's highly recommended on various martial art sites as well. Finally on the list, we have Jiu-Jitsu University by Saulo Ribeiro. It breaks down, like, here are some guards, here are some subs, and things like that. So, it's a really good list. Something to definitely have on you if you just want to make sure you know, like, have a good foundation of everything. So if you think, oh man, I'm missing something from my game, just go through the book. It has a great list for different subs, escapes, positions. So check it out. It is a good one. And this wraps up my list for the physical, fiscal, technological, and law books. You might be thinking, you're missing, like, karate books or this and that. Like, yeah, all the karate books I have, pretty shitty. They're pretty useless. There's just a lot of books out there, so I could only go over what I have on me at the moment. I have a ton of books in storage, so I'm sure I'm missing several, but this list will keep you busy for a while. And maybe sometime in the future, people leave messages, I'll read even more books, and we'll have a part 3. Until then, I am Hector, and this is the Adroit Dojo Podcast.